From seed to shipment, from small business to big sale, this is Trade Routes. We're your hosts, Tiffany and Addie. Every month, we'll talk about how a product produced in the Western U.S. makes its way to global markets. We'll also dive deeper into specific aspects of international trade. On today's episode, we're giving you an introduction to the Western U.S. agricultural landscape and the way its producers participate in international trade. We'll be joined by Jason Fearneyhough, WUSATA's Executive Director, and Megan Weeks, the Senior Director of International Trade Programs at the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, or NASDA. Let's get rooted in the Western U.S. and ready for the world.
All right, here we go. First episode. I think nine months in the making. This started right after both of us came on.
Yeah, very exciting to finally be recording our intro episode. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. Well, not all of the listeners know who we are. Maybe none of them know. Maybe let's give them a quick introduction of you, Tiffany, and me, Addie, and where we came from, how we ended up at WUSATA, because we kind of got here around the same time.
Yeah, we did. We both started around July of last year. So it's been, 8 or 9 months, I think, now that we've been working with WUSATA. For those who don't know, the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. We'll get into that in our interview, who we are and what WUSATA does. But yeah, Addie, why don't you start with your background and how you came to WUSATA?
All right, so I am currently the marketing and engagement intern at WUSATA. I am also a graduate student at both a university in Paris called Sciences Po and a university in London, the London School of Economics, where I'm studying a joint degree between environmental policy and international development. Prior to that, I was working in government relations at the Texas Department of Agriculture, acting as the liaison between our state agency and the legislators, as well as groups at the federal level and the regional level. So I interacted a lot with actually WUSATA's counterpart, SUSTA, which is the Southern United States Trade Association, and really got to know about their programs and their mission and the way that they operate in kind of this ecosystem of agricultural policy and international trade. And so in graduate school, when I was looking for something to continue expanding my career, WUSATA seemed like a great fit. I was really interested in the international trade component and just generally looking for an opportunity to explore that international agricultural environment further. I didn't grow up in my agriculture, but I studied it in college. I studied agricultural business at Clemson University and have absolutely loved it ever since. So I've really enjoyed all the opportunities that I've had to continue expanding my world of agriculture. What about you, Tiffany?
Yeah, so I'm the marketing manager at WUSATA. Like I said, we've been here about the same amount of time, about 8 or 9 months, started last year in the summer. And I came from an agricultural background, so grew up on the livestock side of agriculture. My dad is a cattle veterinarian, and I grew up really involved in 4-H and FFA. So that led me to studying agricultural communication at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And following my graduation from college, I actually went to Ghana in West Africa for about 4 months to teach agriculture and work with local 4-H programs. After that, I came back to the U.S. and started working at the U.S. Potato Board, or Potatoes USA. There, I was managing our food service marketing programs for about 6 years, both on the international and domestic sides. And following that, came to WUSATA to continue working on marketing in the ag industry. So it's been a really interesting change going from a specific product, just working on potatoes, to working across the Western U.S. region with a really wide range of products.
So cool. I remember when you told me about your experience in Ghana, and I feel like that could be like a whole podcast in and of itself. So maybe a later episode we'll get deeper into your time in Ghana's agricultural sector and working with the students there.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, Addie, you did a lot of our upfront research preparing for this podcast. Let's start with our name, Trade Routes. Where did that name come from, and how did we kind of settle on Trade Routes as our podcast name?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of went through multiple iterations of podcast names. Trade Roots was not the first one I came up with, but I'm happy that it's the one we've stuck with because I really think it represents what the podcast is about. On one hand, we have trade, which represents the very straightforward technical side of things that we are looking to address and educate people about. We want the listeners of this podcast, kind of no matter where they're listening from, to feel like they're learning something more about the trade landscape because it can be really complicated right now, and it's not easy to break into or find exactly where you should go for the resources that you need. On that side, we'll really be diving into some of the specific aspects of the things you need to know to get you to exporting. And on the roots side, we also really wanted to reflect that this podcast isn't just a monologue of us talking 45 minutes. It's really about stories of people from our region, from the WUSATA region, and how they've been able to be successful in international markets or the roles that they play in helping companies from our region be successful. So we wanted to, on one hand, have the technical side, and one hand, have that really human side of this story that we're telling.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head with why we're here and what we're doing. It's really about telling these stories of the companies that we work with and how they've gotten their products from the Western US to these global markets. Because, like you said, it is a really complex world navigating international trade. And it can be pretty intimidating, I think, for someone who is new to exporting or has never done it. It's something that is a really big endeavor. So, having examples to follow and maybe gain some of those nuggets of wisdom from other people who have been in those shoes before can be really helpful. So we hope that this podcast is really useful for those who are just starting to export and even those who have been exporting and might be exploring new markets or new aspects of international trade. There's always something to learn, I think, from other businesses who are doing the same thing that you're trying to do too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, examples of success are really what we're trying to show, but we're also not trying to hide the difficult pieces of it. The landscape is really evolving a lot right now, and we'll talk with Megan further in the podcast about tariffs and how those are changing things, but also how companies can take a really long-term perspective on trade and the relationships that requires. All right, before we get into the podcast, I think we should maybe tell our listeners who exactly we're referring to when we say the Western United States and Territories. So, Tiffany, a little challenge for you. How quickly can you name all of the states and territories that WUSATA represents?
Okay, here we go. We've got two territories, Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, and then our 13 states, Hawaii, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado.
Woo!
Is that
Okay.
them all?
I think that was
Did I get
probably,
them?
yeah, that was
Okay.
15. I think that was probably about 15 seconds as well. So nicely
Okay.
done.
1 second per member. Perfect.
Yeah. And California is definitely known as an agricultural powerhouse. It's consistently leading the country in agricultural production and exports. But that doesn't mean that some of our other states aren't number one in other really fun areas that we'll get to in some of our future episodes. For example, New Mexico, number one producer of chilies, and it's always vying for pecans. And then there's also Hawaii, which is number one in macadamia nuts and lots of specialty crops that can kind of only be grown in that climate, like coffee and ginger and tropical fruits.
Yeah, and then Idaho, of course, number one in potatoes. Very familiar with
Classic.
that world, and I think it's something a lot of people know about. Washington is the number one producer of apples in our country, which again is very commonly known. So yeah, we've got a lot of really, like you said, great agricultural powerhouses in our region. So it's really interesting to see all these different members come together and support exporters of all these different products.
Definitely. Well, with that, I think let's get into the episode.
Hello, Jason and Megan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Trade Routes podcast. We're really excited to have you on for episode 1.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Tiffany.
Yeah, this is exciting. Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for thinking of NASDA. Very, very excited to be a part of the first episodes.
Yeah, of course. We're really happy to have you both on today. We already have done some formal introductions, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into both of your backgrounds. And I'm going to have both of you answer this separately, but I want to know what got you involved in international trade. So a little bit about your background, but specifically how you got into this world of ag trade. Megan, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I am from a small town in South Texas called Uvalde. Born and raised there. I grew up there my entire life. Family still lives there, and Uvalde County, and that greater area is known as the Winter Garden area. So agriculture is one of our main industries. I have been surrounded by ag my entire life. 4-H and FFA growing up. My grandfather owns a farm equipment dealership. My father, friends, family members, extended family members are all in the farming and ranching business. So it's just something that it is in my blood. And I got into international trade whenever I was at Texas A&M. I did an internship actually with NASDA. I'm dating myself here, but back in 2004, I think was when my internship was. And about a year and a half later, after I graduated, NASDA offered me a full-time position. It was to work on our FAS program and on our trade shows, but our trade program has evolved quite a bit over the years. And so I've been with NASDA almost 20 years, and we just keep growing and changing and doing good work. And so that's how I came into international trade. Cut my teeth at NASDA, and I'm still here. They're still putting up with me. So it's been a great experience and a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's awesome. I was a 4-H and FFA kid myself, so love the ag background there.
Grew up in Uvalde. Did you know Matthew McConaughey growing up?
I did not, but my aunt and my mom used to babysit him. He comes to Uvalde actually more than people realize, but Uvaldians really just treat him like he's one of us and a local, there all the time locally. People don't tend to bother him, so I think that's part of why he likes to come, to be honest.
It sounds like a whole nother podcast episode.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jason, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got involved in international ag trade?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been in and around agriculture my entire life, is similar to a lot of people that are in agriculture. But as far as international trade goes, it's something that I kind of fell into. So as a young person, my dream was really to get into the livestock auctioneering world. I am an auctioneer. I had gone to school when I was like 19 to become one, but my first job after college was working with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, and I was an inspector. But I had in my mind that I wanted to be an auctioneer and do something different. So my mother's college roommate knew that this was the path that I wanted to go down with the auctioneering. So she had me call a gentleman, his name is Bill Bunce, still a very, very good friend of mine, who had been in that world. And I called Bill, just a cold call, asking him how he got into the world of being a ringman and working with cattle auctions and all of that type of stuff. And at the time, he was transitioning out of that world, and I had no idea he was coming to the Wyoming Department of Agriculture to head up the International Trade Division. Mm-hmm. And so our conversation talked about the auctioneering for a while, and he said, I don't think you sound like that's the job for you, whether that was true or not, but ultimately he ended up recruiting me off of that phone call to stay where I was and come work for him in the international world, and something I just completely fell into. It was not something I was seeking out at the time, but that was 30 years ago, and so I've been involved in international trade at one level or another ever since that day.
How cool. Yeah, auctioneering is such a specific and interesting skill set to have, so it's interesting that that's what led you to ag trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in all the time that I've known you, I've never seen you demonstrate these skills. So
yeah. That also could be another podcast. Right? Be good.
So it sounds like y'all both have pretty long and impressive careers in agricultural trade. How do you think the trade landscape has evolved in the time that you've been a part of it?
So from my perspective, I'll jump in if that's all right. But I think it is ever changing. But I don't know. Evolution is an interesting word. I think that there's been a lot of technology that has kind of changed the landscape a little bit. I mean, just like anything else, you can have these conversations like we're having here in remote locations. I think 30 years ago, sometimes my monthly phone bills from calling people from the Wyoming Department of Ag at the time, they were $1,500, $1,600 just trying to
gosh.
get, when you were, because everything was charged by the minute. So the ability to do some things globally from that aspect has really, really changed. But as I look at I guess the relationships and how things have happened, it seems like it's more cyclical as far as programmatic type stuff. Things happen. We're in the middle of things that are happening today as we speak, globally, that have us on a little bit different footing than we were a month and a half ago. Just trying to look for markets and helping people get into those markets. So those things, the changes from my perspective seem to happen a lot day to day, but very cyclical. I think the technology piece has really kind of changed the landscape. Megan, what are some of your thoughts?
Jason, that's a great point, and that's what I was going to say too. It is an ever-changing landscape. You really hit the nail on the head. We have things happening right now that are going to impact us next month, probably. Sometimes I feel like it's evolved, and sometimes I think, oh gosh, we're going backwards. So you've got to know how to roll with the punches, and I think you've got to be ready to change and adapt to the new technologies that we all have access to. Whether you're out in the pasture or sitting in an office, you've got to know and understand how important it is to adapt to technology.
When you think about the ability to do banking, it is such a different environment there. You can have the things done instantaneous. Now there's obviously some risks that come with this. Instead of somebody telling you the check's in the mail, you can actually receive payment the same day from international sources, which did not happen, not that long ago.
Definitely exciting to see how things change like that over time. And like you said, Megan, I think that adaptability piece is really key for anyone involved in ag trade. This episode is going to cover a little bit of the background of Western U.S. agriculture, and then we'll get into some more specifics about trade. So, Jason, I've got a couple questions for you specifically about agriculture in the Western U.S., which, of course, is the region that WUSATA represents. First of all, what are some of the top commodities and products that you see coming out of our region, and what are the types of businesses that we're really focused on supporting at WUSATA?
Okay. Well, it's there are so many different things that come out of the West, and to start, I think one of the things that makes our region a little bit unique is the vast diversity. And we certainly have states that play in typical commodity markets. I mean, you have some wheat, some corn, those types of things that are grown throughout the West. Not nearly as much as happens as you move a little bit further east into the Midwest and South and Southeast with those things. So many of our states, actually, agriculturally speaking, are livestock producing states that are really large in that realm. But it's not the case if you look at the West Coast. I mean, we have anything from a lot of nut production, a lot of fruit production that happens in those areas. The wines that come out of the entire region, but certainly along the coast, are big. But really, it's hard to answer that question when you're talking west-wide because we are so diverse. And if you look at the 13 states and the 2 territories that we touch, every one of them brings a little bit of a different picture to people's minds, and rightfully so. We have desert environments, we have mountain environments, we have some very fertile farming environments. Coffee comes from some places in Hawaii, and it's such a vast area, which kind of leads to our fun opportunities in the West, and being able to work with such a variety of products and crops, but then products that come from them.
You're absolutely right. It is a very diverse region that we cover, and it makes the product category that we're looking at extremely interesting and diverse. Do you see any common threads connecting the states and the territories that are in the Western U.S.?
I do. I think that, number one, the thing that is, with all that diversity, there is still, like other regions of the country, there is a pride about being from the Western United States. So right there, just with how people approach things, there's a lot of similarities, a lot of independent mindsets that come, both from businesses and working with our partners at state departments of agriculture. So that's one thing, and I think it's a strength.
So moving from the diversity of all of the different commodities that WUSATA supports, can you tell us a little bit about how WUSATA's funding works?
Sure. So we are we're a reimbursement program, as are all of the SRTGs, and certainly in NASDA with their programming as well. We get funding from USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Foreign Ag Service. Ultimately, we have two different sets of funding mechanisms that we send out there, and one is designed to do more on the marketing side, and anything that if somebody's going into the market as a company, we can reimburse them at 50%, as long as they are sending us qualified claims that come in. It's a fairly broad array of things on travel and the marketing materials, those types of things that happen. And that's typically toward a trade show or those types of things. And then the other thing is if somebody's wanting to do an actual mission. Our partner states have missions where we invite companies to participate, and we pay a good portion of the dollars it would cost them to participate, both going out into these markets and then bringing people into the companies themselves.
Sounds like something that would be very interesting to a lot of small and mid-sized businesses. But how do you balance supporting the existing participants that WUSATA has and recruiting new ones?
Sure. So we're allocated a specific amount of funding every year with USDA. So it can be challenging sometimes, but we are always looking for new companies. We have a lot of people that are fairly new into business, or maybe they just don't know about our opportunities that we have. They've been there for a long time, or they are maybe think they're interested in international trade. The states recruit as they meet people that they feel would be benefited by our programs. So they're out there working every day. Then we have a team of engagement executives looking for those companies and explaining what happens and how they can partake in what we're doing. But right now we have not had a problem yet of saying new companies coming in negatively impacting the companies that exist. And if that were the case, it's kind of in a qualified manner, first come, first serve is probably the model that we are moving toward, but we're just not at that point yet where it's a real problem. So, and ultimately the USDA is looking at giving us more funding. So that is that's for all the SRTGs.
Great. Well, moving over to the U.S. as a whole and what NASDA does, Megan, can you tell us a little bit about what NASDA does to support American ag exporters?
Sure. So we are a bit different from other, I'll call it FAS cooperators, which is what WUSATA is, obviously, and there's the other SRTGs are. We are different in that we do not focus on one product or one commodity. We encompass all of U.S. ag. So we are here to serve our members, who are the 50 state departments of ag, a commissioner, secretary, or director. So I'll use Director Miyamoto from Wyoming, since Jason knows him well and is also from Wyoming. So there are producers that Director Miyamoto serves. So we advocate for states in front of the federal government. So we have a policy team at NASDA that is making sure that there is sound policy that is set in, say, a farm bill, for example. We, of course, have our agreements with, our partnership, rather, with the Foreign Ag Service, just as WUSATA does. Our Foreign Ag Service funding is meant to produce trade shows. So different from WUSATA, we do not have, I think y'all call it the cost share program or maybe the branded program. NASDA does not have that because you all at WUSATA, the SRTGs, are managing that aspect of it. What we're doing is setting up trade show pavilions at the National Restaurant Association show, at the America's Food and Beverage show in Miami, where we bring in the state departments of ag and those companies, the small and medium-sized companies who are eligible to participate, and they are getting exposure to an international audience without having to leave U.S. soil. And someone who's listening who may not know just how that strategy is laid out, the reason that we do an international program at domestic shows is because of the number of international attendees that come to those shows, and these are qualified buyers that the FAS posts all over the world help us recruit. So they may help set up a buyer's mission at a show, or maybe NASDA and WUSATA are collaborating on a buyer's mission, and those posts or maybe an end market rep are telling us these are the players, this would be a great buyer to have at a show because they are interested in purchasing X product. At NASDA, I like to say we bring everything full circle. There are a lot of layers to try to explain, but you cannot make the sale at a trade show, for example, without that sound policy in place first. You've got to have that happening. You've got to have the strong partnerships with your trading partners, and know what is available out there for you to make those sales happen. So that's how NASDA is different from WUSATA, but we work together in tandem to make those sales happen for these small and medium sized companies.
Yeah, I think NASDA definitely brings a unique perspective, and it's really valuable, obviously, to have your partnership with the other state regional trade groups or SRTGs like WUSATA. Can you speak a little bit about kind of that value that you see in the partnership between NASDA and the SRTGs?
Oh, absolutely. I could go on and on about that. It is incredibly valuable to have such a close working relationship with the SRTGs, and that's something I've really worked hard to amplify in the past 7 or 8 years since I took this lead role at NASDA. Collaboration is so important. We've got so many activities that we are doing, and there are so many opportunities for us to work together. Being able to pick up the phone and call the three of you, or to call someone else at another SRTG and say, hey, we've got this company who is interested in participating in the show. Do y'all work with them? Have y'all heard of them? Passing them on to you all so that they can take advantage of your programs, your cost share, and even on the trade mission level too. Having that collaboration on when we are taking a delegation of NASDA members abroad, understanding from you all what members might be interested or what members might be a good fit because they're having a challenge with a product or a trade barrier that they're trying to overcome to make a sell happen and help a company get access to an international market. So the value that our partnership has, I can't express the appreciation that NASDA has just with the work that we do with the SRTGs, whether it's on a buyer's mission or even on a trade show or at a trade show or even a trade mission. Jason, you know that you participated for a couple days whenever we had that delegation from Morocco come to California last June. You've got to know who you can collaborate with, and you've got to be strategic and really bring your resources together, pull your resources so that you can have that big impact and really help the producers and the companies in your state, your region, and really all over the country.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And I can tell you the appreciation goes both ways. We really appreciate all the work from our perspective that you guys are doing at NASDA to really lay all that policy groundwork for us and support trade shows and all that good stuff too.
Sure. And can I jump in real quick? I just want to give a shout out. We've mentioned SRTGs and multiple times in this, but just for if somebody's listening to our podcast, that WUSATA is the Western U.S. SUSTA, which is the Southern U.S. Trade Association, is another state regional trade group, and then there is Food Export Midwest and Food Export Northeast, and we all work very collaboratively together, and we kind of have our own little worlds, but we also work very closely together. If somebody's out there listening, so that they know if they're not in the Western U.S., you have one in your neck of the woods too that you can work with. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great nugget because it is a Western-oriented podcast, but that doesn't mean that there aren't little pieces in there that apply to people in other parts of the U.S. So thank you for that. Good plug. The ag industry I've found from my experience is so collaborative, and I think producers and agricultural businesses can really rest assured that there are so many people that are willing to work together to support them as they're in this export journey. Moving on to a more macro view of exporting. From your perspective and experience working in international trade, how do other countries view the U.S. as a trading partner, especially right now? And what is their perception of U.S. food and agricultural products?
We talked a little bit earlier about, how the trade ebbs and flows for a variety of reasons over the course of time, right? I mean, there's There's days where things are happening with one, export market that are really, really solid and hot today, and for some reason, whatever it may be, um, you know, a year from now, that one cools off. So you have to be very, I think, adaptable as a company. We certainly do in the worlds that we live in. But ultimately, regardless of what's happening in the world, it's really important in my mind and has been throughout my career, even when things are maybe a little rocky in a specific trade area, that you maintain relationships and you maintain the partnerships, even if the sales aren't coming today, because things happen that may change that for tomorrow. But I would say the export markets stay strong for the United States because we have incredible quality of product. So we have a very strong advantage when we go into markets, because people want that quality and they want food safety just like we want it here. And so it's something that we can really kind of put out front as a flagship. And I think NASDA has done an amazing job of doing those types of things on the policy side for us and making sure that people are aware of those things. So I think number one, when you have a solid product, you have the safety aspect that is there. They have faith in our systems. That's a really good thing. Then the other side of that is maintaining relationships, and that is a lot of what we try and help people do, is make sure that we're finding those good places where they can build relationships and then maintain them, so that you can move your product forward, make it need what's yours.
Yeah, no, you said it, Jason. It's the U.S.'s safety standards, quality standards are so high. We hear from some countries that yes, it might be a slightly more expensive product, but they do their best to navigate that. And most countries don't care. Some countries don't care that our products might be a little more expensive because they know they're getting quality and safety. There are some things we've found, and I've learned a lot just from doing these trade missions with our members, with the RAP program, the Regional Agriculture Promotion Program. For the listeners out there, we've got a lot of acronyms to deal with. There might be a concern, like let's say biotech in one country, that a country's a little bit hesitant to do business with us, but that's why it's so important to bring delegations to the U.S. and to show them, hey, this is how beneficial biotech can be for producing in your country. Really getting them out into the field and getting them to understand that. In another country, it might be something different. It might be a phytosanitary issue that a country is more sensitive to. Animal welfare is another issue that we've heard a lot about. And again, we've opened a lot of eyes and changed hearts and minds by hosting a lot of delegations here in the U.S. and making them really see, okay, we do need to do even more business than we're already doing. And Jason, you said it too, the partnership is very, very important, keeping up the relationship and the FaceTime. Exporters and people who are, and companies who are interested in getting into exporting should know that don't make it so transactional. It needs to be a relationship. It's kind of like you're dating in a way. And then, you put the ring on the finger and you sign a contract. And just because you sign that contract doesn't mean your work is done. Your work's just getting started. I'll give an example. We took a NASDA delegation to Morocco in 2024. And every single meeting before we left, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, we were getting an invitation to come to my home and have dinner with my family tonight. And it's this way in many other countries too, but in Morocco, they are so into really having that deep relationship with you. They want to know about your family. They want to know how your business came. They want to hear your story. So I would encourage companies who are in exporting or who are getting their feet wet to really take that into consideration, and don't be short-sighted and make it just a transactional thing.
Yeah, that relationship building, I think, is what makes this industry so special and feel like such a cool community to be a part of. I think when you're looking at international trade, it's obviously so broad and big, working across the whole world, but it can feel like a small world sometimes when we're talking about those key relationships and building those strong senses of community with the people that we're working with.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we've talked about how the world of trade is always changing, always evolving. Trade policy can shift very quickly. How can the small to mid-sized producers that we're talking to and working with, stay ahead of the changes that might be affecting them and their businesses?
I think that number one, making sure that you're aware of them, but I think there's opportunities through the groups that we've been talking about here today, WUSATA, the other SRTGs, NASDA, and there are resources there to help with that for sure. We have, as does NASDA, as do the other SRTGs, we have contractors that exist in other countries. I think we have 9 of them at WUSATA. So we stay abreast of all of those things that are happening, and we have conversations with Megan and her team at least weekly, if not, a couple, 3 times a week on different things that may be happening, and what's going on. I mean, we have a trade mission coming up here at the end of April that we're taking some folks into Egypt. And of course, right now there are a few concerns that are happening. We're staying abreast of those things daily to make sure that everything is still a go. And at this point, it certainly is. We're excited to say. So, it's basically that relationship at a variety of levels makes all the difference in the world, so that we do have very accurate information for people, whether it's getting into a market or what happens with the labeling issue that exists there. We maintain a lot of relationships across a lot of areas to make sure we can respond to people when they have those concerns and questions.
Yeah, Jason, that's a perfect example. You've got to utilize what you have and take advantage of what you have, and be aware of what your State Department of Agriculture and the programs they offer. And even, go a farm bureau, a state farm bureau, even something as simple as following the House Ag and Senate Ag Committee on social media, and, seeing what they're posting about the Farm Bill, or any other things related that come in front of their committees. That's so important, and that can help you build up your knowledge bank of what you want to focus on. And I think don't feel like you need to figure it all out in the first 2 or 3 times you're attending something or tapping into a source like WUSATA or NASDA. Take it one step at a time, and you're going to find other work companies there or other people who are like you, who are just thinking, wow, how the heck am I going to wrap my mind around this and really understand this? And that's where you can, again, build that network and start that knowledge exchange, and kind of form your own alliance in a way. And there's plenty of resources at your fingertips that are really of no cost to you.
Definitely. There are so many resources out there and so many different aspects of the ag industry to learn about. Specifically regarding trade, in the news, we're constantly hearing about tariffs. Megan, I imagine this is something that you keep track of very closely in your role at NASDA. Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of where things stand right now with the tariff landscape? Because I know that's something that can be a little dense at times.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the policy landscape. It's evolving, and the U.S. we've been pretty aggressive with our tariffs over the past several years, but there are different tariff issues that impact markets differently. So for the EU, it's an ever-changing landscape. Farm to fork is something on the regulatory side that impacts us in ways that we don't even realize. And it's going to look very different from China, for example, or even from the USMCA, the Mexico, Canada, US agreement that we have, where we have agreement with them, but there's still some friction there, some tariff friction there. Also learning too about the free trade agreements that we have with other countries. The term free trade agreements can be a little bit deceiving, because Morocco is one of the countries where we truly have a free trade agreement, but I believe whenever about a year ago, I think we had 10% tariff slapped on to Morocco. So it's a lot like what I said and what Jason said earlier about the ever evolving policy landscape. You've got to use what's at your fingertips, and you've got to understand that what's happening in one country is going to look very different from what's happening in another country or even just on a continent itself. I mean, India is a good example. There's a lot of opportunity there, but the tariffs have been really, really high recently. And, you can't be afraid to ask questions. You've got to understand how things work between other countries like the EU and India, for example, so that you have a better understanding of how the US can be more competitive and how you as a small business can be more competitive in that country.
Yeah, free definitely doesn't mean free for all. There's still a lot of agreements that go into those free trade agreements.
So, Jason and Megan, curious on both of your perspectives on this. What are some of the top characteristics you've seen across brands who have been successful in their export journey?
I would say, number one being people that have a great product. If there is a brand that has somebody that has a business that has a great product. Number two, somebody that is flexible and somebody that has some tenacity to them to make sure that you stick it through with all of the potential changes that come.
Yes, I would say you've got to be tough. You've got to build your network, and you've got to utilize the resources that you have, and you've got to ask the questions. And if you're asking questions, that's showing a potential partner, a potential buyer, how passionate you are, and how willing you are to learn.
For anybody that's in exporting or even just starting to think about it, those are very useful pieces of advice to just get in there, just start using those resources, start looking at your opportunities. Are there any emerging markets that either of you are very excited about?
I'm going to say Africa. That's a continent, and we know that, but there are many countries in Africa where there's challenges, but challenges mean opportunity. So there are so many things, going back to the U.S. being so popular in terms of our safety standards, our quality standards. Countries like Kenya, Senegal, Morocco. I think Africa as a whole, but I listed those three countries. Those are three countries that we at NASDA are really excited about. And it's going to take a lot of education. You've got to understand that this is a long game. With any country, it does. I'm not just singling out Africa here. You've got to be ready to play the long game, and you've got to be patient. It's a little bit like playing the stock market. You can't have knee-jerk reactions and pull out if something negative happens. You've got to be willing to be invested and to show those potential buyers how serious you are.
There's so many to choose from, but I think right now we have a lot of interest in the ASEAN area, which Megan touched on the Africa side, but there's opportunity, and I think the one thing that kind of is interesting from the WUSATA perspective, going back to the diversity of the products and the crops that are grown here, is there are new opportunities on every continent. Not Antarctica yet, but every other continent that is depending on the company itself. So we have our focuses within our strategies, but then if somebody is coming and if they have an idea, we are willing to listen to that too and say, hey, if this is something that works for you, how do we build that into our strategy over time?
So if I could build on that real quick, Jason, something that we say every time we take a NASDA delegation somewhere, or every time we're hosting a delegation in the U.S., and we truly mean this, is that we really emphasize two-way partnerships. We all of us here know that a one-sided relationship is not going to go far at all. So if there is a country who needs something from the U.S. where we or an SRTG or another FAS cooperator group can help with, we want to do that because we want both countries to benefit. It's not going to work if just the U.S. is the only one benefiting. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because that is a very, very important thing to consider if you're just getting into exporting, or if you are a veteran exporter and you're maybe trying to get your product into a new market that it hasn't been in before.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like relationships are super key to this whole endeavor of exporting. Okay, we've got one last question for y'all because I know both of you are important people with other things to do. So very quickly, if you could live in any of the Western U.S. states or territories, besides where you already live, Jason, where would you live? and just a very quick why, and then we'll close it out.
You're asking me first, or
Sure.
That's a loaded question. Holy cow!
You can't pick Wyoming, so
you're putting me in the firing squad of 12 other places. I would say, if I could live anywhere, I would live in Victor, Idaho, because
okay.
it's very
Shout out
specific.
Victor, Idaho.
But one of the most beautiful aspects of the state of Wyoming, where I am currently, is the Tetons. And if you're in Victor or Driggs, Idaho, you're on the back side of the Tetons. So probably my favorite landscape to see is right there. Yeah.
Okay. And you, Megan?
For me, gosh, that's a hard one. I'm going to say Colorado is would be my number one pick. Any place where there's mountains and where I can go snow skiing
yes.
is important to me, and I know you've got that in Wyoming, Jason. So somewhere in the West, most likely Colorado.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank y'all both so much. This has been such an awesome first episode. I think the listeners have learned a lot, both about WUSATA and NASDA, and a little bit about the trade landscape and what things they need to think about if they're wanting to export as a U.S. small to mid-size agricultural or food business. So thank you very much, and we hope y'all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey from farm to far away. We'll see you next time for more stories about small businesses and big opportunities. I'm Addie, and this is Tiffany, and you've been listening to Trade Routes, a podcast by the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. Like what you've heard? Consider subscribing, leaving us a review to help others discover these stories, or reaching out at marketing@wusata.org. To learn more or explore export opportunities for your own business, visit us at wusata.org. That's WUSATA.org. Okay, I think
Great.
that one was right.
I think that was perfect.